Welcome, welcome, welcome. And finally, we are here, the Commanders Draft Coverage Show. I'm so excited about this show. This is definitely probably going to be one of my favorite shows for the off season to really get into, these prospects and these possible candidates that the Commanders could select with the number 2 pick. I mean, we have 6 picks in the top 104. I'm definitely excited. I want you all to be excited. We're going to be here every Sunday for the most part in the evenings. Today is the first show on Saturday. Hey, 8:30. Watch out for us. We are definitely going to bring some high level content. I'm definitely excited for that. But on the other side of this, we're going to bring in Adam. We got Ken. We got Kyle. We're going to talk some draft and we're going to talk some combine. I cannot wait. So after this, we definitely let's get it. Welcome back. I don't know, like when I usually do the intros, I'm just flawless. I don't shake, I don't sweat. For some reason, I was stuttering on this one. I was, sweating a little bit. Like I know what to say. Man, I guess it's the jitters and the excitement of having you guys in the room with me, man. It's really overwhelming. Like the amount of work you all put into these prospects for the Commanders fan base is definitely like I'm just glad to have you guys here. I definitely appreciate all you guys' work from the videos to what's written coming from it's a joy. So I welcome all of you to the Commanders Draft Show. Just give you a little bit of background. We're going to be here every weekend up until the NFL draft till day 3. Day 3 will probably be our last show, just recapping what actually happened through the draft. But all through this time period for these next few weeks, we're just going to be looking at every position, talking about certain players, and they've already started. I mean, they pretty much every week, a few times a week, they're putting out information on these draft prospects. So I'm definitely excited. So, I mean, Cal, when I reached out to you, what did you expect for this show to be?
I'm not 100% sure, Deuce, but I will say this. I was honored to be able to be asked to come on here and join you guys, not only you, Deuce, and everything that you represent and what you have built with the Red Zone and the Lab and just the community. It's not just about yourself, but it's about everybody else. But being able to talk here with the draft with guys like Ken Johannesen and also Adam Aniba, Adam himself, he could talk to you about having interviewed Kyle Duggar before he was a name before that draft process. So Adam's work speaks for itself. Then Ken, obviously, with his connections and all the info that he has generally, you weren't kidding when you said that like the jitters before this show. But it's going to be a lot of fun because there's a lot of football knowledge in here, and it's going to be a delight.
Adam, I've been like me and you have come across each other's paths a few times. We never officially worked together, but we was always this close.
Oh
So
yeah.
when I reached out, you was like, "Oh yes, glad I've been looking to work with you, man." You just don't know how excited I was by that. I mean, what did you expect for this show to be?
Honestly, man, a lot of people come across me. We talk about projects and stuff, and it's like I always take it with a grain of salt until honestly the day before, because unfortunately, not everyone is dedicated and puts in the work weekly like you and the other guys on the show. Because, but I knew with this situation what I was getting into as far as professionalism and organization. And honestly, that's one thing you'd be surprised with all the podcast shows, stuff out there. It's far and few between, unfortunately. So yeah, I knew I was getting into, a professional situation with this. So looking forward to it.
Definitely appreciate it. And the beauty of the show. Ken. Okay,
Why
so
did giggle?
me and Ken, we started working together this past year. Me, Ken, and South, we have a show, airs every Wednesday during the football season, and Ken came on the show a few times before that. But Ken puts in tons of work. I mean, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 18-hour days, just scouting and looking at these players. So Ken, when I first reached, I mean, Ken wasn't a surprise because I've been telling him this is something that I wanted to do in the off season with some guys that's really dedicated in this work. But what are you looking to get out of the show, Ken?
I think I'm going to learn a lot from all three of you, to be honest. I'm going to get different draft perspectives in a podcast for the very first time, other than my appearances on the Burgundy Zone and obviously with you, Deuce, every other week or so. But, all those are very brief, and a lot of my work is written. So to come on a podcast and do this over several weeks, I think my collective intelligence will grow considerably, I hope. So I look forward to working with you guys, and I'm very, very humbled to be here.
Hopefully on behalf of Adam and Deuce.
Well, don't count yourself short. By the way, how's the microphone now? Is it better?
Yes.
Okay,
it's
good.
Better. It's better. All right. Let's get straight into it. It's when it comes to the draft, like everyone knows, I rely on you all. DT, who helps me produce a lot of the shows on the Red Zone in the Lab. C. Henry, Lady E, who's on Enters the Lab. Of course, Adam, you put stuff out. I even send you a name. Hey, can you do this? Next thing I know, in a week or so, you got this big old article. The same thing with Kyle, putting out clips just for us to get an understanding and Ken. But I don't. I'm gonna be honest. Like I figure out a few players that I like and who I'm gonna be debating about in these spaces, and then the guys I look at. Everybody else, I just cheat. I just cheat off you guys' work, and I just move like that. And I'm honest. I've always been honest about that. But Adam, when it comes to if someone wants to learn how to evaluate players, how would you explain them in layman's terms how to evaluate players?
Well, baseline, like I'm a writer. I've been a writer for 20 something years, wrote about sports, creative writing, things like that. And I've always been in the draft and, my team, Washington. So I decided a couple years ago to, figure out, what training is out there for scouts. And honestly, surprisingly, there really isn't. There's not a school for it. There's not anything. But there's this great program run by Dan Hatman. He worked together with Louis Riddick, Scott Pioli, a lot of former NFL GMs and scouts. They put together as well as a scouting academy. So I enrolled in that. It was 2018 through 2020. And so basically, baseline, you learn about how to create pros and cons, breaking down players. But what I loved about them is, if you're a diehard football fan, you're going to that program, you'll think you'll know a lot of the players. But what they did is they put the most unknown 4th, 5th string receivers out there. And every week you had to evaluate 2 positions, 5 games each. And that's basically how it started. That's how I can, say it, the easiest way to explain it. And for a lot of people, it sounds kind of easy. But after that, then you have to put a scouting report together. Then you have to get approved. So that was a weekly thing. So what I did is I took what I learned over there, incorporated into, my love for the team and my love for the draft. And I kind of just, put my own, stamp on it. But I think the minimum for me is you can't sit there and watch YouTube and then just say, okay, this guy's going to be this, bad, good. You can say, just from
I'm sorry, something happened to my mic. What'd you say?
I said, if you want to put a full scouting report together, one thing you can't do is watch a highlight reel and put it together that way.
Can't watch YouTube. Is that what you said? You can't just watch YouTube? Is that?
Yeah, you can't just watch YouTube. Because you'll see the good things, but you won't see the bad things, the tendencies, things like that. So I'd say, that's the baseline. That's how you start. And I think, like I said, 5 games. That's really from, how I was trained and, how Riddick and everyone explained, like bare minimum to get an idea of a player, tendencies. And what happens is you watch those 5 games, then you end up watching those 5 games again or watching more games. And then through a draft process, you'll like a guy, then later on you might not like him, or you'll like him even more. It's an interesting process, and it's not an exact science.
Let's get some comments. Commish been here since 8:15. We definitely appreciate you for being
He
here.
was here before Deuce was.
Right, yeah. Hey Kim, hey John, Wayne, what's going on, buddy? DT. Yes, everyone, please hit that like button. Let's get that algorithm working. See Henry trying to see if the tape supports the measurables. If not, why? Riri, hi Kyle, hi Ken, and hi new guy. This is
Adam's not new.
Oh man,
New to them.
Yeah,
y'all are going to be hearing my voice. Sorry if I start do this sometimes. Oh, you all right, John? And Chase is also going to be helping us like in the background. And Chase is really like quiet, right? He doesn't really do like speaking spaces a lot, but he's always there. But he's very knowledgeable about college football and NFL. Like you can say, give some fifth round guy just like you guys, and he'll just, oh, he did this, he did this, he did that. And he's very quick. So he's definitely going to be helping us in the background when we might need some stats or some player or something like that comes up. Everyone knows Yam, right? Everyone knows Yam. I think Yam is the biggest Commanders content supporter there is. And I mean across all Commanders content. Sure. What's going on, David? It's 2 a.m. where he is. We definitely glad that you joining the show. But YouTube has an entire compilation of box plays and runs by change things. He does not want change things. What's up, Daryl? Definitely these might be your first time joining this channel. Please continue to come back. And that's Unc. So Ken, you post things to the timeline, and you know, it's always somebody or some people that's always going against what the work that you've put in. How you evaluate the players? How do you approach that? Like how do you approach that?
I'll go back all the way to high school when I played football. Back then, the film that you watch was a reel-to-reel machine, and the coaches would put that together during the week, and usually by Thursday we were watching film for the next game. And that was my first introduction to that kind of technology. So I was a film guy in the very early days. I've been on the internet since 1983. I go back to when the internet was just a hobbyist and an educational forum type thing. And so there was no football. It was all technical stuff, right? And I love that. So along the way to, absorb some of the technical aspects of football has been interesting. And I'm a newcomer to analytics. I understand basically how it works, but now trying to integrate it into football is very interesting. I'm still learning that. So what I do now is I still study film. I like Kyle mentioned, you have to, or you mentioned actually, that you have to look at the good. Actually, Adam just did. You have to look at the good and the bad of every player, and you have to, take it all in and make it the best evaluation possible. But I also look at analytics nowadays. I see their scores, and then I try to go back and look at games and see why they're scored that way. It's still difficult for me to get through that, but I'm light years ahead of where I was, say, 6 months ago. And now we have a team that's going to analytics big time, so I'm looking forward to that. But me, as far as how I got started, really started on this journey and to where I am now, started with a place called Burgundy on goldobsession.com. Those guys were some of the former Extreme Skins moderators and owners. And they started BGO. And then I started blogging just for the fun of it. And then they gave me my own, designation as the as BGO's blogger, and then expanded over to social media by 2017. And then I went to Rigo's Rag that same year. And this past year, I'm at Hogshaven now,
Mhm.
and I have every year my knowledge of the draft, free agency, in season stories, it expands, and I'm where I am today. So, in other words, this journey is still continuing for me. I'm still learning, trying to put it all out there. And when people agree or disagree with me, I don't take offense to it. But when someone tries to come at me with something where you're not demonstrating good knowledge of the game, yeah, I get a little bit defensive about that. I don't like it when I do that. I'm trying to get better at it. But the people that are out there and they just want to just pick on anything, that they're going to do that, and I just have to live with it.
So you mentioned film study. Cal, he mentioned film study, and Adam talked about evaluating players and analytics. How do you is there a separation between evaluating players and actual film study, or is that all the same thing? And how do you incorporate analytics?
Or analytics, I personally kind of use as the exclamation point at the end of the sentence, essentially. I look at film first and foremost, obviously, and then kind of get a judgment off of that. But in regards to evaluating players and just overall film study, for me personally, I feel it has a lot to do with respect. You have to be able to respect the game, respect the process of the play. You have to be able to respect the goals of what each side is doing, of what each player's responsibility is, and understand what the undertaking is. Myself personally, I work construction, right? And there's people that are above me who tell me what to do, but also can't do my job. And there's a lot of NFL players who feel the same exact way, right? And you kind of have to correlate that into it. There is a respect factor here. And so once you understand that respect, you can kind of understand what's happening in front of you and what is really happening in front of you. And then the baseline for me, I like to watch film with no sound. I like to be able to see what's happening because the other stuff I don't really care about. I like to be able to make the play pop off to me. And there's certain things that you look for in the structure and the root of a play because, like I talked about earlier before, there's a respect to the game. If you really do respect the game, you want to learn about it, and you should. And there's certain roots to things you have to understand and mold. And like when you watched Ken Griffey Jr. swing, like
Oh man, it was so beautiful.
you knew when it was a beautiful swing, like you just knew the swing, right? But if he had a bad twitch or if he was injured in his arm, you'd easily be able to tell that it wasn't a normal swing by him, right?
Hmm.
And that's my sort of mindset with these players is understanding the root and respecting the root of the play so you understand what's supposed to happen there so you can tell when it's a good swing and when it's not. And that's the important part. And I feel like it's probably the hardest part for a lot of people.
How do you, Adam? How do you, when you watch the tape? How do you take it from video to paper, in a sense? And how do you incorporate analytics with like somewhere in that transition to the paper to be able to say this evaluation also includes analytics? It's like the full combination of all things film.
I keep it pretty vanilla with me. It's standard as far as what I liked, what I didn't like. And so after they're usually after the fifth game, I pretty have it's like Kyle said, no sound, no other stuff, no highlight music. I like to I put those on my channel, but that's just to really give exposure to the article report prospect. But for me, it's just like all 22. Just focusing on them. It's not always easy, especially when I do small school guys and HBCU guys, to get really good film. Sometimes it's very grainy, very hard. So talk about 5 games, I can take 10, the amount of 10 games because you miss so much stuff and you have to go back. But to me, it's just repetition. And, I'm looking for certain things at positions, edge rushers, tight ends. Every year, I feel like I'm getting better. I feel like this year with Washington their need for offensive tackles, I've really refined my idea of what to look for as far as, adequate kick slides, how they're reacting, quick twitch athletes, that's the different things I'm looking for. So it's a very subjective thing, but for me, I'm learning about analytics from people I know, but I don't really incorporate that too much into, my basic evaluation from day to day.
Tim, James, Cash, just your average fly guy slide. Definitely appreciate you guys for popping in. And Marcus, what's good? He is another heavy supporter of all Washington Commanders content. We definitely appreciate you you tapping in. So this is a big thing for me when we talking about need versus BPA. All right. And I'm gonna come back to Cal because I don't see the difference. I don't see the difference between need and BPA, right? The only way I can see the difference is, and let's think about the Bengals, for instance. That's just a scenario
Mm.
where the Bengals have Jamar Chase, and they also just tag T. Higgins. I don't know what they're going to do with Tyler Boyd, but let's say somehow, I don't know, Rome falls to them, right? Obviously, Rome is the best player available, right? But they don't need a wide receiver. So in this case, if they want to go BPA, it would be Rome in a sense. But any other scenario, it's like you're not going to take a player you don't need, even if they are the best player on the board. So to me, it's always best player available at your need. But
I'm
if
with
it's different, I need you guys to help me explain to me the difference.
Well, for me, I'm going to answer this in kind of like a GM kind of way, Deuce, because you have to, life is a lot like balance. And yes, you could use the Bengals as a good example, but the other example you could use on that and the other side of the spectrum is Washington with the first round picks at defensive tackle and defensive end. You can kind of see how in 4 to 5 years that can cause an issue in cap because that is a factor here. Yes, in life, you could say, yeah, just throw spaghetti at the wall as many as you can and make it work, right? But the fact is that there is a balancing act here, but the other facet, the other variable we have to consider also is your division and who does your team entail to be the roadblocks stopping you from getting to the Super Bowl. Beforehand with the Bengals, they could have been saying, well, we need points scored more so than we need points limited. And that's why they went with Jamar Chase to add him with Joe Burrow. So I think it is much more so as a difficult evaluation decision to weigh. But I do ultimately think that you can rely on analytics in a way to kind of prove your point, but ultimately it's about the cohesion there and what you're ultimately building. Because let's say like this draft in particular, it's a wide receiver heavy draft to your point with the question, but let's say you need a defensive tackle, you need an edge defender there, but there's a plethora of wide receivers in this draft, but there's not that many edge guys you can have start right away, get you double digit sacks. What are you going to do in that first round? Much more so, I think it's much more valuable for you in that sense to take the edge guy because you're getting the production in a place that you drastically need it that is important for you. So it's multi-layered, very complicated. I don't think it's as simple as best player available versus need. I think it's much more layered in the sense of a long-term view. How does this piece fit into what we want to do? And does that allow us to be successful to win a Super Bowl in 4 to 5 years and not create a financial problem?
Okay, so you added financing to it, which is a
big
big
deal.
part. Yeah, it's a big deal, big piece. How do you come at BPA versus need, Cam?
I think teams that are picking higher in the draft are probably going to have a tendency to pick for need. Look at the needs that Washington has. They're going to fortunately have 6 picks amongst the first 104, 105 picks. So they're going to have a good opportunity to fill a lot of needs also in free agency. Whereas teams that are consistently in playoffs, they have that luxury of going BPA.
Right.
Now, when you just mentioned Cincinnati, in recent years, they've been a good playoff team. They stumbled a bit this year, injury to their quarterback, that affected them. But let's say that scenario plays out like you just described. They have one of the best wide receivers staring at them when their pick comes up. And is the best player available at that point. Let's say they go ahead and make that pick. Everybody said, well, that's a wasted pick. 3 games into the season, T. Higgins, maybe Jamar Chase, goes down, is lost for the season. Well, guess what? You have a player that can potentially step up and not necessarily take the place, but can take up the slack, and they won't skip a beat. That's what good teams are able to do in the draft each year. So the better teams are going to basically go BPA. Teams with needs, especially those first 10 picks or so, and they're going to have the first 10 picks or so in each round, not the first 10 picks, but a top 10 pick in each round. So they have a great opportunity to fill a lot of needs, and that's generally what you see in the draft each year. So I think in a few years, if Washington does really improve with all these new players, you'll probably see them going more of the BPA route.
Mm-hmm.
Can I answer John his question back? It's a great question, Tad. Like, how do you decipher the two positions? Like, let's just say you have a corner and you have a wide receiver, whatever, two positions of need that are like very similar in what they offer. I think the decipher here, John, is the interview process and fit. And I think that is ultimately one of the biggest cogs in with these NFL teams is the how guys get picked or where. It's because of the interview process and how they fit in with your football team. And I think that's probably where the details go. And I would not mind if somebody would bring into the argument, John, of saying analytics, like the RAS score, what they offered in stats and playmaking ability. That's the other facet here that could also play into you deciphering the two picks.
So we have financial impact, BPA versus need. We have being able to compete, being a good team for a consecutive number of years. We have, interviews, whether it's top 30 visits, combine, senior, whatever. What more can we add, Adam, to the BPA versus need conversation?
Like I said, to go a little more like in depth with money, I think it can't just be thrown out there. It's extremely important because for a lot of people they're like roll with Howell next year, build the offensive line, but when you can have an opportunity to get one of these quarterbacks, let's say Daniels or May, you're talking about in a couple years, the way the NFL is going, this is going to be $60 million a year quarterbacks at least. So granted, it's a crapshoot. So there's 20%, let's say 20% Daniels or May hits. Okay, but if that 20% hits, that could be the difference between you and a Super Bowl division championship or not. So that's where a big factor comes in with the money, in my opinion. So I think that's something very notable, especially with position, because you talk about, need, and luxury. I think in this year for Washington, it kind of falls in both buckets.
Man, I'm gonna love this show. Considering all the hoes we have, not jokes, hoes we have, and we'll come to you, Adam. Any top player on the board where we pick should be selected. And I'm gonna let you know this is Trail, so he's definitely talking about Caleb Williams. That's I think with this angle is definitely Caleb Williams, but that's his question. So so I think basically he's like make the pick who you need, or do you try to add more picks? I think that's where he's trying to go.
I think if you're talking about with the first pick, with the current situation they're in, granted it's not a 1 year solution. It's going to take time. We don't like to hear that because Ron Rivera, but honestly now they have a GM who knows what he's doing. They're hiring people in the room that are collaborating. I really believe him for once because I was happy about Kingsbury, but then when they brought Lynn in, my level of excitement totally changed because I do feel like everyone's so caught up in this air raid. I think you're going to see something totally not expected. And I've been talking up the tight ends in this draft, and we can move past the quarterbacks. I think to me that's a given. It's going to happen. We're talking about the second round. Granted, we need offensive tackles, and I think they're going to solidify that position. But they just have some guys like my favorite in this whole draft. Of course, Brock Bowers is the head of the class of tight end, but Sennett from Kansas State. This guy. I think when they brought in Lynn, it got me excited because you saw how they used Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco. That fullback tight end kind of mold at 6'2". Mm-hmm. Well, Sennett's 6'4", 250, and he moves the same way.
Yeah, he
plays fullback. He has the option at H-back. That's the kind of guy I'm looking for. We lose a guy like Curtis Samuels. So you're thinking like, what other kind of weapons they're going to incorporate into this kind of offense? So you have McLaurin, you have Dotson. I think they'll get a wide receiver somewhere along the way, but what I think should be a surprise and enough fans aren't thinking about is the tight end talent in this class. You have not just center, Theo Johnson, from Penn State today, he just, blew it away. You have a lot of guys that you can just not use as that traditional tight end role. And, forget the position flexibility stuff. Ron kind of ran that into the ground. But with skill positions, that does matter. I think when you're incorporating a new system, like I said, with Lynn involved, I think you are going to see a dedication to play action in the run game. So what better it is to have these weapons in the, you have 2 second-round picks. I think you can address that kind of, skill position as well as offensive tackle. Because I agree with a lot of fans out there. Once you get past Alt from Notre Dame and Pashanu from Penn State, there is a drop-off. And it's more about a drop-off of these guys are more likely to play right tackle, even though they played some left tackle in the NFL. But I don't think that that's exclusive. I think with the coaching, the right coaching, everything going around, I think that guys even projected in that way can be worked in at left tackle. So the offensive line, it is going to be a big work in progress. And they're not going to be able to just solve with the draft. Free agency is going to be huge for them. But, I think that once everything gets going, and if it really is this collaborative that we're hearing, I think good things are going to happen. But, after the quarterback, I think offensive tackle, skill position like tight end is really important, because I think after you got rid of Lewis and Thomas, I think the writing was on the wall that, they've got a bunch of tight end 3s on the roster, tight end 4s, if that. So I think that's definitely going to be a position that they're going to go for in free agency and the draft.
So you telling me Amani Rogers is not Travis Kelce?
We don't know.
Not yet. But he'll
lost him, boy.
chance.
They act like we just lost Travis Kelce. Ken, I'm gonna come to you with this. Ken, we're gonna take this question around the room. Do you think the GMs have a list, a need list, and a BPA list? And when you're building your mock, I guess, for the team, do you have a need and a BPA list?
Well, let me give you a list. Do you want a list?
Huh?
This will. I have all kinds of chords here. The Commanders have met with at least 389 players so far in this draft process.
That's insane.
That's actually pretty typical each year.
Really? Wow.
And it's probably closer to about 405, 410 once I get through the HBCU stuff this coming week. And I only have a few from the combine, so I know there's going to be more. Quarterback, they contacted 24. That's a new record from my scale. Wide receiver, they've met with 44. Tight end, 20. But there's not as many quality prospects overall. Running back, they met with 23. Offensive linemen, 75 so far they've met with. That's 28 offensive guards, 32 offensive tackles, 15 offensive centers. Now, some of those are position flex, offensive guard and tackle.
Trigger.
He knows that position flex triggers me. But I'll get through it. Cornerback, they have met with 47 corners so far. Strong safety, 17. Free safety, 18. Position flex there. That is total of 82 defensive backs so far.
Wow.
So this tells me right now that offensive line, defensive backs are getting plenty of attention, especially cornerbacks. Linebackers, 36. That's unusually high. That's the highest I've ever seen of that number.
Shocker.
Good.
Yeah, I know. And we're getting toward the end here. Defensive line, 68 total, with 33 being edge rushers, 35 being defensive linemen, defensive tackle. Now, here's an interesting stat, and it's all sevens, but it all came at various intervals. They met with 7 kickers. They have met with 7 punters. And in previous years, I've never seen them meet more than 2 long snappers. This year, 7 long snappers.
There we go. There we go. No discrimination. We're everybody, babe. Long snappers, you're important.
So this gives you an idea. Now, I would say they're already in the process of paring the list down. And they probably have 275 to 290 players right now on their board. So they have, they're starting to put, players in each round, but they still have, the top 30 visits. They still have team pro days to go through after the combine is tomorrow, right? Or Monday. I think it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And so they're going to have to go through all that. And so they're paring down that list already. So, they're formulating their draft board as we speak. And also, their priority undrafted free agents. And they probably have a group of players they want to invite to rookie camp. So that's what they're doing now. So, this tells me that the emphasis is going to be offensive line, defensive line, especially edge. Let's clarify that. And cornerbacks.
Man.
So, what was your original question? Because I was going to bring this all together.
No, about two lists, a BPA list and a need list.
Okay. What I'm looking at here, great, because I'm looking at a needs list here, period. That's what I'm seeing. Now, they might not draft a cornerback in this draft, but I highly doubt that based on these numbers. I think offensive tackle being the highest number of the offensive linemen is a priority in this draft. I could see two, especially if they don't get one in free agency. So we're looking at team needs here for this particular draft. And it goes back to something I said a little bit ago. I think that's Washington's focus this year. And in the coming years, they can go BPA. Now, when we get to the latter rounds, you're probably going BPA because rounds really 5 through 7, you're looking for what? Special teams players, special team aces. You're looking maybe for someone can be a hidden gem that fell in the draft a little bit. So you're looking for those guys. But overall, the first 4 rounds with a higher pick in the 4th round, I think you're looking at team needs. There's your answer.
And those guys too, a lot of those would be what we look at for in the undrafted pool too.
Yes.
Some of those players. But Adam, where are you with the list? Do you think there's just one accumulative list, or do you think there's a separate list?
No, I think it's probably pretty much a cumulative list. I think, what they have to fill this, this is a new regime, new team. So they're building, even if they don't want to say the word rebuilding, they are rebuilding. So, you're building the meat of the team. They will take them for what their word that in free agency, they're not going to go crazy. But I think you expect one blue chip signing, one high price guy. I saw a question on the bottom of the screen about, Tyron Smith. I just find it unlikely. I think because, a position like that at a premium, he'll get decent money in the free agent market, and his injury history is scary, but there's going to be a team, not Jacksonville, but, someone like that's going to invest a lot of money in him. I just don't see Washington. So I think that they'll be more savvy, not quite like Ron Rivera in the bargain basement offensive line, signings, but I think they'll be, more mid-level to higher level guys. And I think they're not going to rely on going to the draft and solidifying their line. I think they're going to try to get a lot done in free agency. I think to ask, a guy that's not even a, top 3 tackle to be starting year 1, I think it's more about expecting some vets. They'll take their lumps, but they'll be developing, some of these young offensive linemen. But like Ken said, he said 2. I think at least, with their picks 3. Because I'm predicting that, somewhere around the 4th round, they're going to trade back. And they're going to get, accumulate more picks. And I think that's where you see more depth at, center, interior line, things like that. But I think when you invest in a quarterback, and I speak it into existence because I just see no way it's not going to happen. You have to build it. It's not just this year. It's this year and continuing to draft every year until you have the best line of football. Like I said with Peters, I look at his track record. I look at Denver. I look at San Francisco. He's an assistant in Denver. But everything I've heard in San Francisco is John Lynch was a lot more of a figurehead, businessman. And Peters was really the brains behind a lot of that. People talk about the Trey Lance trade. Everybody messes up on a quarterback, so that means nothing to me. But what did he do in the mid rounds? And that's where, that guy helped build that team. He was a catalyst in building that team. And you see how they built that offensive line. Wherever he's been, gap running schemes. So I think, people are confused to think that you have to get, top 50, even 100 guys to start in that. I think you can get guys in the mid round and slowly build what kind of guys they have in mind. That's when you start to get to day 3 and you start scratching your head thinking, on my mock simulator, that guy was undrafted. How did this happen? But that's what good scouts do. You're going to start to see names that you just didn't recognize. And I think that they're really going to put a lot of emphasis in building this line, because if they're going to get a quarterback like Daniels or May, he made an emphasis about, making it multifaceted. I think you really have to protect your investment.
And Tim says, I would say need comes into play on day 3, but rounds 2 and 3 should be BPA. Round 1 needs to start with position, can only draft certain positions in the first, and BPA, and then need. Let's go to John. He says, so if there aren't a lot of quality guys at tight end, but there are a lot of linemen, which are bot positions. I don't think that's what he meant. Of need, then you go tight end to get a guy good enough and wait to get old. Okay, so
it's similar to what Buffalo did last year with Dalton Kincaid in the first round. Right?
Yep. Because I think, and that was one of the things that I was kind of thinking about is, if you have a strong group, right? We know the tackle seems like a strong group, wide receiver seems like a strong group, but as of before the combine, things changed, of course. But like the edge linebacker wasn't as a strong of a group. I mean, even running back, you can argue that. Would you kind of reach a little for those guys earlier because of how deep the other positions are? Like, can you get away with doing that? What you think, Kyle?
No, I think there's plenty of options there available. I don't think that you should be pushed into a corner in that regard, because no team only has one need typically, right? And so I think the hypothetical question is kind of a difficult one, because you're not ever in that corner, and typically you're not ever in a position where you have 2 great Hall of Fame level edge rushers, and there's only one really good edge rusher right there, and there's nothing else that you can do to make your team better, right? And so in that regard, it's different from me. But to John's question before about the 2 lists right now where they're at, I think this regime already has a list. I think that one of the reasons why Adam Peters didn't scrub the scouting department is because the scouting department provides the list, the breakdown of which players are in which rankings, right, all the way down the list. And then for me personally, I think that you would have to rank them in like a diamond, a gold, and then you start going to like silver, bronze type level stuff. But you have to imagine that morphs through the draft process. Once you get to the second round, the guy that was a silver in the first round is now going to change to a gold, because the situation has changed. And that's how I kind of view these guys. And I think fit goes a lot into it, the interview as well. And so I think that Adam Peters and company then come back after they've given them the list, and they make the diamond, gold designations to say this is who's really fitting with us, who isn't. I don't think it's much more so of need and best player available. I just think it's more so of a collective, do we feel good about this guy?
Definitely. I definitely, I just like, and it's so much for us to talk about. That's why we're going to be coming every week. But that room, and I think Adam, you mentioned it earlier about how they were saying it's going to be a collaborative effort. It's the honeymoon period right now. Everything sounds good, right? True. But when I want this player, you want that one. Quinn is going to have to really step in and own that room along.
That's where that one vision comes in, Deuce, and having the,
Yeah, everybody has to be on the same page. Yep. But I want to take a quick break. We have a new show that's also going to be debuting the week before the draft. It's going to be called Trenches NFC East Podcast, where this each teams in the NFC East Podcast going to be coming together each week during the NFL season to talk about the games. And it's going to be fun because it's going to be more so of a debate show between all 4 teams. So I'm definitely ready for that. We're going to run 3 episodes in the off season, as pilot episodes, and then we're going to come back at the beginning of the season around. But let me just drop this promo for you guys. Definitely excited for that. That's gonna be fun. We got 4 people from each, and it's some good trash talkers. I can't wait for that one. I'm not going to be on that show. I'm just going to be producing it, but I'm definitely excited for that show. We were going to do stock risers, some sinkers, but we're going to hold that for next week. Somebody was like, "Oh, what about the O lineman?" I was talking to somebody. We got to wait for the O lineman. So, guys, if you don't mind, we're going to come back next week and we're going to do stock rises, and
They're
by that
used to not
time,
being getting the spotlight, man. You know.
I have the list ready.
we're going to definitely come back, especially to give you guys some time to work, because we're not going to be reinventing the wheel. Right, what Adam has worked on or working on, that's what we're going to be bringing to the show. His actual work, where to get to it, and that's what we're going to be coming off from our topics for. The same thing with Cal. The players that he's already looked at. This is what, and the same with Ken. We're not going to have news. We're going to use exactly what they're already using, because I want you all to really see and engage in their work that they putting out. Like, this is not something that they do in 20 minutes, right? They really put effort and time in that. And I just felt it was only right to be able to use what they're already doing for this show. So that's definitely what we're going to be bringing as we move along in the off season. But I do want to get your guys' top. Let's do top 2 players. Coming in three. Okay, three. Kyle wants 3. We'll still go with 3. Give me your top three players coming into the draft. Some strength and some weaknesses. Ken, we'll start with you, Ken.
Okay. I have a tie for third, but
Okay.
top 3. Number 1.
Look, can't forget O-line. See, that's why I gotta wait, because of him.
I understand. Number 1, Caleb Williams. I just think he's the number 1 overall player in this draft. Marvin Harrison, I have at number 2, a player that's going to probably go to Arizona, is who I'm predicting. Number 3 overall, I have a tie as Drake May, Joe Alt, and Brock Bowers.
I love Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
I was watching some clips, YouTube, Adam, don't get mad at me. I was watching some clips last week of him. How many reverses did he take last year? He was like Debo Samuel when he won reverses.
Yeah.
That is insane to me. He's definitely going to be a weapon. All right, Cal, give me yours.
All right, but I just want to let you know ahead of time. It's not like I'm picking my top 3 players I think are literally the best in the draft. These are the top 3 players I like at the moment that are really exciting to me. I just want to let you guys know that ahead of time. The first one is Christian Jones, the right tackle from Texas, 6'6", 321 pounds, a super senior, had 48 starts in his career, and has done left tackle and right tackle, has started and played in every single game going back to his sophomore year. This kid is projected on PFN. Obviously, they're not the end-all, be-all in rankings, but around a 5th to 6th round. I think this kid is probably a 3rd to 4th rounder, and you could plug him in a right tackle, and he could play right away. And the next guy that I'm going to talk about, he played really well in their game against them, and I didn't see many other people being able to do that against this edge opponent. And this guy, Christian Jones, was able to control it, has very strong hands, has that tenacity, the violence to want to end them into the dirt and inflict violence upon them. I've talked for a while, this offensive line needs an identity switch, and obviously them letting go of Leno and possibly getting somebody like Christian Jones in here would be a first step in that direction. I think Christian Jones brings that violence to the table that you absolutely love. Then the edge defender I talked about earlier, Darius Robinson, 6'5", 285 pounds, 29 tackles last season, 8.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. His stats don't jump out at you, but when you watch his film, it absolutely does. The hand usage, the violence that he inflicts upon the offensive lineman, how he's able to create space in that regard. Hand usage is something that is typically having to be taught and specialized in pass rush. Darius Robinson already is a pro in that regard with his hands. You don't even have to worry about it. The one concern that you have with Darius Robinson is his top-end speed. He doesn't have the Micah Parsons type of speed, bend, quickness to get around the edge and get to the quarterback. But he is a freaking animal in the run game and in the pass game. And they have to, if you put a tight end on him, you might as well go back 5 yards because Darius Robinson's going to destroy the play. Last guy I'll talk about. I had 3 other ones prepared just in case you want to do like later round guys. But I'll say the Peyton Wilson kid. I'm sorry, Adam, if you were going to talk about him. 6'3", 30 pounds. Had a 9.8 RAS score. 138 tackles, 6 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, 3 INTs, and 1 touchdown. When you watch this guy, he's all over the field, and I think that he epitomizes really it shows what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt want to inflict on defense, especially from a linebacking standpoint. To the point where if you watch his film, they move him all over the field. Outside linebacker in coverage, also middle linebacker. They bring him in on blitzes. Very, very smart, and also he's incredibly fast. Really good in blitzing in that regard, and also is coming off the edge and run defending. He's solid there. The one concern about Peyton Wilson, though, is against very, very good run blockers. If you watch the Notre Dame tape, they actually did a very good job of being able to get him out of the way and run lanes because he does struggle in that regard against proper mechanics and blocking. But for the most part, I've talked about pursuit angles, and that's kind of nerdy of me. It's one thing I absolutely love. Wilson is elite in that regard. He tracks people down in elite angles is something that is very hard to teach, but it's just how you pursuit somebody and being able to stop them before the goal line without losing more yardage. And it's very detailed. But those are 3 guys I am absolutely loving at this point. I'm sorry for taking so much time and some of your prospects.
Oh, good, buddy. We got a Scott McClure reference. He's a football player.
Yep.
They want hard hitters. Yes, they do. And DT taking notes. See, I ain't the only person that copy. But no, I really look to DT for a lot of stuff, man. Adam, who are your 3 guys?
Well, I'll talk about the guys that that I love by evaluating. The coming weeks we got a lot of time, so I'll just talk about the guys that the top of the draft, the guys I think are the best ones. We're talking about quarterback throwing 1, 2, 3, which I think is very possible. But to me, the wide receivers, man. I've been watching so much Jaden Daniels. This kid Malik Neighbors, he's phenomenal. We talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it's 1A and 1B. With him and Neighbors, if one of them flip-flopped, I really wouldn't be surprised because Neighbors is that good. So right now it's, Marvin Harrison Jr., then, Neighbors 1A, 1B. But then after that, Caleb Williams, I think it's that's where he is at 3. But to me, this kid, Brock Bowers, I think that he's just he's not going to get picked that early. But, I think he's in a tie with as far as Caleb Williams, where I think, these are the 4 guys that I think are going to have, the most immediate impact. But, man, if Washington lands up with JD5, man, I'm telling you, I think this kid can resolve his issues with, taking hits. And I've reached out to a lot of SEC scouts. And one thing that might surprise a lot of fans, and unlike, the comparisons to Lamar Jackson and, especially RG3, those are the worst, is in his system, the Reed system, those were a lot of design runs. Over 70%, I learned from people around SEC that evaluated that over 70% of those runs were design runs where his second or third read, many times his second or third read would actually be to just take off running. So I think that he showed this last year.
So in the passing game, his second or third read, instead of it being a tight end or wide receiver or running back to throw to, it was actually to run.
And a lot of that was because the offensive line was so bad. Also was putting them in better position because their defense was so bad.
Yeah.
So they figured that, in those situations, at least getting positive yards will put them in better situation once they punt it. So that was always the idea. But what did he do? He just turned it around 20, 25 runs a pop, like it was no big deal. So he exceeded that. They continue to do that. The whole idea of him taking hits over and over, he's not going to last. Listen, if you hear the young man talk, you hear his coaches, he is so cool with just being a pocket passer all day. RG3 wanted to do certain things certain way. This kid going to transferring was the best thing that ever happened to him. So again, I love Neighbors because I watch so much. But JD5, man, I've got them right behind these guys. So I hope he ends up at Washington. But May is close after that. But yeah, JD5 just much higher ceiling if everything comes together.
Now, Cal, like Adam did say, hey, look, we can talk about quarterbacks so much we can, but the people want the quarterbacks, and we're gonna talk about the quarterbacks next week. The people definitely want the quarterbacks.
So depends who you talk to, man.
Well, that's true.
That's a good point.
That's true because I'm done. Like when I'm at the point, like whatever Bruce Wayne wants to do, all right, whatever. I'm done. Like I'm done battling the quarterbacks. So we're going to get more into our players, more into the draft. We can go position by position. We're going to take some of the top players in the draft. We're going to take some of the players that's looking at to go the back of the draft, maybe some undrafted. Go ahead, Kyle.
I want to ask Adam a question. He talked about
Mhm.
Marvin Harrison Jr. I did want to ask him what he's hearing about and what he's seeing, the concerns with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, that's really buzzing around, and that's why I talked about don't be surprised if you see neighbors go first,
Mm,
because I think there's a lot of wide receiver needy teams out there that are going to say I like both of these guys, and it'll come down to see how neighbors interviews,
mm,
because if he's just okay, the situation with Marvin Harrison's not really gonna swing the pendulum, because he's not I don't think he's really being disrespectful. I think he's doing what his agent says. He's doing it his way with a father that's a former player. This is not that surprising. I think people are blowing it in the wrong direction. But again, what I'm hearing is if Neighbors really interviews well and really blows them away, don't be surprised if he goes first. In Arizona, to me, that's everyone I talk to, everyone I constantly. Arizona, whatever they're going to do, that's why they could even trade back, trade up. They're
mm.
going wide receiver, so it'll be one of those guys. But Marvin Harrison, in no way, shape, or form should this be a knock on how he's going to be on the next level. He's a consummate professional.
One quick question for you also,
Mhm.
Adam. JD5 did not do measurements today. What do you read into that?
That was a little surprising. I
Yeah,
was I was thinking, maybe he lost a little weight. He got below the
yeah,
200
okay,
mark. I don't think it really had to do with the height, because everyone at worst case,
yeah,
shortest, if seen him against other athletes, 6'2.5",
Yeah, right.
6'2".
yeah,
That's what he's going to be. So I took it more as maybe he lost a little too much weight, and that'll
okay,
concern some scouts. But I think once you get him into a program, I'm not worried about that at all. I think that they'll be
okay,
able to get that in check, because wherever he's gone, he's been known as a guy that's gone with the program. He's not, he's a little bit of an introvert. That's what I hear. But one
Mm.
thing he's not going to do is go against what coaches say, and he's just, there's no diva attitude there, and that's one thing that I don't think we heard with RG3. I think his charismatic attitude kind of overshadowed a little bit of his ego, and people were able to look past that. He's
okay.
This guy's totally different.
And then with
Oh, Adam,
JD5
that
is
whole
what.
ain't nobody listening for that last RG3.
Yeah, and with
Yeah.
JD5, let's say he does add on weight, because let's say it's floating around 210. Will
But
he still be as effective on the ground with that weight added on? That being said, like we
will
all
they need it?
football people here, do you honestly want him running around all that much?
Yep. No.
Yeah, because I think I'm not too concerned with the weight. I mean, there's a concern. Same thing with Forrest, but I'm not too concerned. Like, no, I don't want to draft him.
Right.
I'm not there. But what I am a little concerned, and Adam, I don't know if this came up in discussions before, but it doesn't seem like he's in the weight room. Because when you look at Lamar and you look at RG3, their muscle index is, I mean, Daniels just look like he just like flabby, like, you know what
I'm
I
gonna
mean?
make you happy. I'm
I
gonna
think it's
make you
like
happy with that tape.
23%, Adam, or something like that for him.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna make you happy though. The issue was they had to kick him out of the film room, so it's not an issue of he doesn't want to do stuff.
Uh,
That Chip Kelly talked about, other coaches talked about. They had to change the hours. This goes back to Arizona State. He was in the film room at 5 a.m. He's a film junkie, and again, you want to talk about old school quarterbacks. Yeah, it is important to get developed. Yes, but developing up here, that's what you need in the NFL to be successful. And from what I'm hearing, he's got that over all the quarterbacks in this class. So forget the running stuff. Forget that. I had him down on that until I started watching games and actually talking to people.
mhm.
That's when my whole opinion changed of him.
And somebody brought up to us on our show not too long ago, saying, Brian Kelly's, or it was oh my goodness, I forget his name, Pete Medhurst, who said that playing for Brian Kelly is very hard. He's very demanding, and it's mentally very stressful on a player. The
Yeah.
fact that Jaden could not only be in that environment but also do really well, he was saying that that's already a notch that meant mentally that he is a tough
Huge.
kid. On top of him being a film rat, on top of it, kind of shows you the mentally. And in the NFL, I think we all know, including you, Adam and Deuce, 80% of the game in the NFL is mental.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. And I learned that in high school. I learned that in high school. We went up to Cleveland and play a team. And because I went to HD Woodson in DC and all Orlando Brown. And this is when he was with them. And we went to play high school up there. And those guys were bigger, whatever, but they wasn't stronger, right? They was, and when the first snap, I was like, wait a minute, because it was all technique. It was all mental. It was all technique. And those are the things that's going to win every single time. Technique is going to win every single. Now, if you have technique and power,
Yeah,
then like Aaron Donald, it's a reason why he's who he is, because he has technique, power, and speed and athleticism.
That's when you get the Kansas City Chiefs.
yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you, that's when you get Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Pat Mahomes on the same team with Andy Reid.
Yep.
That's crazy. Before we go, every week we're going to have a few people send in some audios about the draft, who they want, who they take. If you want to ask questions, you want to give your point, this, and that, and we're going to have the guys to kind of answer it or just kind of give additional input. And today we have two guys, Jake Dutton, and we have also Jay Martell. I'm going to play it up here. We're going to talk about it right after, and then we're going to end our first show.
What's going on, Deuce? One of the prospects I'm looking for Washington to go after is Kansas State tight end Ben Sinnott. One of his pros is obviously his size and then his burst for his size. A con, I would say, is some angles he takes when blocking need to be better. But other than that, would love for him to get drafted by us.
What up, Deuce? It's Jay Martell here. Maybe just get my thoughts about the whole combine who impressed me. And that person would be Darius Robinson. A big 6'4", 6'5", near 300-pound tackle, defensive tackle. He looks like a guy that we could steal out of the second or third round. I think it's a long shot, but if we can get him, that would be great.
So, and I think one of them, and we heard both of those guys and your top guys. Cal, one of them was yours, and Peyton, right? What about him? I mean, like, here's another thing with medical. It's the same thing I deal with Master P all the time, which is Michael Penix. Y'all know I love Master P. Injuries, even though his injury was also 2 years ago. I think he had ACL and what was the other injury?
It was
shoulder.
It was two shoulder injuries and then ACL, right, Adam? I think.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, and he ran a 4.4. I mean, that's a crazy time.
Yeah.
So
and he talked about Ben Sinnott, and then he talked about Darius Robinson, who really showed off. He talked about him as a defensive tackle. Honestly, dude, I've been saying to people, I don't know how it's theorized that he's not a first rounder. Like, I know that we're talking about second to third round. That honestly, when I watch him, my nickname for him is Psycho. I think that he's a first round selection. I'm being honest with that. But yes, he's missing the top end speed, but this dude is gonna have to. People are gonna have to bring attention to him everywhere that he lines up, and you see it all over the field with where he's at. It's just he didn't have any other playmakers around him to really show you what he's really doing. But when you watch him, dude, it's not like the team can just put a tight end on him and say it's okay, which happens with other edge guys in this class that I've seen, and I don't want to pile on guys. But just saying, that guy, when he gets put on a tight end, you see how it doesn't work, and people in the future are not going to do that anymore. And then Ben Sinnott, I don't know about you, Adam. I know you talked about him a little bit, or I think it was Ken, somebody talked about him. I like him a lot. The only thing is blocking. He isn't like dominating in blocking. He's not like Sam Laporta in that regard, but I think that he's one of the best all-around tight ends in this class, not named Bowers. Jatavion Sanders, I think, has a long way to go with blocking, but Sinnott kind of offers you that Y kind of usage. You talked about use check. I think that's perfect with what you want to do with Sinnott, because like you want to push the zone. I think him with Miami would make a lot of sense. If you could push the top of the defense to where they're going deep field and then throw underneath the Sinnott so he can work underneath, I think that's the best case scenario for him, because he's big, long, strong, and nobody wants to stand in front of that when he's full speed.
For me, Sinnott is my second best tight end in this draft. You can guess who is number one. If Sinnott is there in the third round, you run to the podium. We take him. If we take him with the second pick in the second round, I would not be mad about that. I think that is a little bit early for him. Again, the blocking issue being the primary concern. But I think in that regard, I think he could actually learn from this staff. If you have the old staff, I think, no, he's never going to be a blocker. But we have John Bates doing that. And I think this player that's going to continue to improve in year 3. So I don't think you need Sanat to come in and be a blocker. You need him to, go over the middle, do those intermediate routes on the perimeter, and I think he's very good at that. Those, those 12 to 15 yard hitch routes. I think he's just going to be solid in that regard. As far as Darius Robinson, I don't see him getting to the middle of the second round. I think we've said enough about him. The lowest I think he goes is early in the second. So I don't see him in the third round at all. I really don't.
So Peyton, so John, so those two, Jay and Jake, and also John sent in something, but the audio didn't come through. That's why I had Peyton Wilson on my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, that's because I was like, yeah, that's why I had Peyton Wilson on my mind. So I'll let you take that one, Adam. With Peyton, then that's who I was referring to with they had the injuries a couple years back also. But he's been clean the last 2 years, and he came out and run.
He decided to return, and then last year, like I've caught some slack from people because everyone keeps saying, it's all outside guys, no true Mike linebackers. But I truly feel I might be in a minority with some people that this is the kind of guy that you can develop into that role, into that Mike linebacker role. He showed more than serviceable enough, 3 interceptions in coverage, 6 passes defended last year. Again, it's just getting over that injury, history, and also, the narrow frame, the lower body. But I do think, Washington is going to dedicate, to strength and conditioning. I think this is something that's not a year, 2-year project as far as, getting his body right. I think a training camp for this guy in off season, I think this is the guy to me. We talk about Sanat. That's the one I really like. But out of everybody in this draft, Peyton Wilson, to me, he's the hugest hit or miss. The only reason he's the miss is, again, if this injury thing continues to happen. But to me, his ceiling is huge. Like, this is a guy I could see all-pro, one of the best middle linebackers in the game. Even if it's not middle linebacker, I can see him moving around. But again, he's cerebral, and I think that's key for a Mike linebacker.
And to your point, Adam, like with looking back to the Cowboys defense, and nobody wants to talk about them, but the Joe Witt Jr. defense, the Dan Quinn kind of style defense, when you looked at their front 8, meaning their defensive tackles or edges or linebackers, I like to look at them as almost like wolf teeth, shark teeth, if you will. Because each one of those guys, they could stand up and they could line up and then blitz them at any point in time. Right. And they were effective at doing that. And that's what I mean by Peyton Wilson kind of embodies what Dan Quinn and them like to do, where at any point in time he can go and you have to be able to watch him. And so it's funny because like with Dallas, can you think of like who their middle linebacker was? Yep. And that's the beauty of their defense because they move, those guys are all key. Right.
And the thing is, you talk about time speed, okay, 4.4, great, but it's on tape. He's chasing down quick running backs from behind. So to me, those are the little things that you see on tape where, everyone on his team is getting outrun. His corners, his safeties are and he's coming chasing them down. That's some Darryl Green type shit right there. That's not in that mold, of course, but like that's what I want to see. For a team that's been lacking a true Mike linebacker, I say probably since London Fletcher, this guy can bring it to another level.
That's what we talked about earlier, Cal, about the pursuits and levels, right?
Yeah, the pursuit angles. Yeah,
that's pursuit and angles.
The nerdy side of me. But the one argument I'll counter to Ken's earlier about the blocking, Sam Laporta was a very underrated blocker coming out of college out of Iowa. Very, very good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And typically with NFL coaches, like we saw with Turner last season, if you don't show that you can block, they don't put you on the field. Yep. And so typically you have to show in that regard. And that's why with Sanat, I think there are little bit changes that he can make. He's just a little bit too light. Like he's not violent enough and controlling enough to warrant confidence to say he'd be able to go strap up an NFL starting D end, which you have to do.
Yeah, that's why he's so good at that fullback role. Because when he's got a head of steam, he'll knock the hell out of somebody. But when he's asked to be in line and, next to the lineman, that's not his strength. But again, you don't draft him for that. You draft him you can develop that. But that's not what you draft him for. And to be honest with you, these top, I would say 5 tight ends in this class, none of them are going to really give that to you. So when you draft a tight end, I say, in that second, third round, you're not looking for that. That's your later round guys. These guys are going to be impact on players, on in the passing game.
Yeah. one point about Peyton Wilson. He goes about what, 6'4", 6'5"?
Yeah, 6'4", 6'3", 6'4".
He measured today at 6'3", 233.
That's what I expect. Yeah.
Okay, and it's shorter than what I thought. So
Just 6'4",
this
yeah.
makes my point really not a point at all, because, but we see more and more Mikes come out of college that are around 6'4", 6'5". That's a little bit unusual. So at 6'3", that's actually an ideal size for a Mike nowadays. But if he did measure out 6'4", my point was going to be, I think that's even more of an asset going forward. But I'll actually have another point so I can make sense of, jumping in like this. I did have a tweet yesterday that I thought Peyton Wilson, based on not only what he did at the combine yesterday, but what he put out this past season, I think he's played himself into the second round.
Agree.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Because, up until a few weeks ago, so many analysts had him going pretty much in the fourth round, some in the third. And I didn't see that. I thought at least third.
The real ones knew.
I had him late second, early third in my report.
Yeah.
We know how this process works, Ken.
Yeah. I'm just saying this for everyone out there who may have a question mark, because I did put it out there, and a lot of people replied to that tweet, said the injury history scares me. Of course it does.
Yeah.
But I still think he has played his way into the second round, period.
Yeah.
And the one, if we're talking about Mike linebackers, legit, like just being able to ask when you look at a prototypical guy, I would like to talk about next week a guy, Aaron Casey, the linebacker from Indiana. I really like what I've seen from this kid, just from what you would say, what you ask out of a middle linebacker. That's somebody I would like to talk about next week.
Most
we can,
definitely.
But real quick question for you, Kyle. Did the combine scare you off a little bit about him?
No, because I'm not trying to be a dick or anything. I just don't really care all that much about that stuff. I think it more so as an exclamation point. So his film, I think it's way more valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know how I feel about the combine, but we'll talk about that next week. But yeah, Tim, Peters is I think it's with us it's a fine line, right? Talking about character. It's a very fine line. We heard a lot of character, but sometimes it depending on what you want. And before I just want to say this about Ron, and we talk about character and what you want from your team. Ron built the team how he wanted to build it, and that part succeeded. Like the type of players he wanted, the type of front office he wanted, the type of staff, the cooks, everything, the type of people he wanted. That's what he built. That's what he had, but they just wasn't successful at it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a Cam Newton. He didn't have a Cam Newton. See?
Right.
That's a good point, about the mental aspects. And Adam Peters, it sounded like, from what I heard, the same thing, that he's placing an emphasis on that. We had a GM a few years ago that said, I want football players. Okay, great. He went out and got Sua Cravens. Now, how much did he look into the middle? Because there were questions out there at that time. He just ignored it. First few games, Sua Cravens is playing that new hybrid position, which was new at the time, really, really well. Then all of a sudden, all the middle stuff just came cascading down all at one time. And within a couple of years, he's out of the league.
Yeah, that's just why I'm excited.
That's just a good example.
I'm kind of excited about how he's building the front office, people with all different types of backgrounds. Because with Ron, you call him a good leader, but he's leading a whole lot of yes men. Like he has, even like you talk about Terry and like Allen, those are still yes men. They're not going to come to practice late. They're not going to buck. They're not going to not wear their shirt and tie. So in order to really be a strong leader, you have to be able to lead all different types of personalities. Each person individually and different, but we're gonna talk more about that later.
We've talked about that before, dude. You got to have your a-holes.
You have to.
You have to have those dudes that you would that you would never want to fight because you know what they do. You need those guys.
You have to. All right, let's get out of here. Of course, it got really good at towards the end. But Everything about these guys, everything that they're working on is in the description. Is going to be in the description after every show. So you can follow them. The link tree, all of the links, everything is in the description. So, follow them. And like I said, all the information that you see on these screens, when we start sharing screen and looking at film and looking at writings, is going to be their work. It's not going to be nothing we're creating and pulling from anywhere. It's going to be their actual work. So I'm definitely excited. This is good. I am really excited about this. Ken, any final thoughts, Kim?
No, I really enjoyed, breaking the ice today or tonight and getting different perspectives on the draft. I've learned quite a bit. I hope to learn a lot more and look forward to next Saturday.
Cal.
Or is it Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah. Sunday, 8:30.
Okay.
Cal.
Nothing much. Obviously, Adam showed his expertise of being able to give us a little bit more knowledge. It obviously gives us those tidbits of info, and that's why Adam is so good at what he does. He's been doing it as long as he has been. It's been a pleasure, boys, and honor to be able to do this with you. We got to contain ourselves a little bit because we all have so much to say about all these prospects, but it's going to be a lot of fun moving forward, and it was a pleasure, boys. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, can't wait. Adam, it looks like you got a DM coming about a player. John, he couldn't get the audio to work, but he's really, really high on Peyton, boy. He's really high on Peyton.
Well, I'm seeing on the top of the screen new follows. I got a couple of DMs, looks like, from this show.
See, look, yep.
But I like that. Honestly, I like that because Kyle and anybody knows can tell. You DM me, we talk questions. I'm not one of those guys that's stuck up in if I have an opportunity, I love to talk ball, and especially in a forum like this, where it's cohesive, people aren't talking over each other, things like that. Because unfortunately, that I go on AM radio here and there, mostly Virginia, Maryland, and unfortunately, that's what it turns into a lot. So I've tried to shy away from that and try to find good situations. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Looking forward to future shows.
Most that because Spaces and those plays not for everybody.
Spaces I listened for a little bit, and I got to dip.
Because this is our safe place because we don't have the other rival teams bored and their daily lives coming to infiltrate just to talk crap about us.
But one of them did, the bad guy.
I know. I saw it.
He's in the chat.
So, dude, go to work, man. What are you doing?
Oh man, I appreciate everyone for spending your time with us. We know your time is very valuable. For you to spend it with us, we definitely appreciate it. Remember, do it because you love it, not because it loves you. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love.